and welcome back to another edition of the Puberty Panel. But this is going to be recorded on YouTube and on Spotify, but we are not actually going to be doing a panel. We're going to actually be doing a one-to-one session again because I have the amazing Thomas with me. Tom, hello.
Hi, Says. How are you doing?
Oh, not bad, thanks. You all right?
Yeah, not too bad. I think, at the moment things are a bit weird because I recently had an ACL reconstruction surgery. They like replaced a couple of my ligaments in my knee. So like I'm sort of slowly transitioning back into like my job. But it's taken a bit of effort to kind of readjust the schedule and like do stuff like that.
I mean, it's really hard to get back into the routine, really, of what everything's going around you, and it's overwhelming with things like that. But you're definitely really doing well by the sounds of the progress on Instagram, because I know it can be really hard, but you managed to be a trooper, and I'm really, really proud of you for that.
Oh, thank you very much. I spent a lot of time on YouTube trying to figure out exactly how to do stuff. um,
I mean, YouTube is quite hard at times because when you think of ideas, you just think, "Oh no, what do I
yeah.
do?" But your mind goes all over the place, really. That's normal, really. That's just like YouTube stuff. But anyway, Tom, we need to know a bit more about yourself. So, is there anything you want to talk about, like hobbies or interests, or what you do for your channel or on Instagram?
I think the place that I'm probably most well known for is either my podcast, the 40 Auti podcast, or my work on Instagram. But so the 40 Auti podcast, it's like an autism and mental health podcast, and I've had people on from all different walks of life, or people from different places around the world, and it's all really good, and it's kind of like it's not very much like an interview style podcast. It's more of like a chat and a chill kind of thing. And I was very happy to manage to nail down Temple Grandin for my first episode of the season. Yeah.
I never heard of this, but I know Temple Grandin's really hard to interview, really. But she is absolutely one of the biggest role models in the autism community, actually. But what other guests have you interviewed on your podcast, Tom?
Um, well, I've interviewed a guy called Steve Silberman, who's like is a lot bigger in the US than he is in the UK. He wrote articles like The Geek Syndrome and the book Neurotribes, which was a real eye opener for me because I'm not really that big on history and stuff, but it was the first kind of like autism history book that I've read. And then of course Simon Baron Cohen, which was around the time that he released the whole Spectrum 10K study, which was a really interesting talk. And Purple Ella as well, which
Oh,
was really nice because they were one of the first people that I came across on YouTube when I was like in my infancy of advocating and stuff.
I mean, Ella is always great to like with an interview and all of that. But I need to get her on the podcast sometime. But everyone that you come with, it's always lovely when you do a podcast just to meet and chat with everybody because you get to know more about things, really, don't you? And I know with that, Tom, you probably feel the same way about it.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, isn't it? Because like when you start creating things, um, you go from being like a sort of a user in the space, and then you start creating stuff. Like undoubtedly, you're going to have less energy to engage with people, to sort of, I guess, consume the stuff that other people are making. So it's not often that we get kind of unless it's like an active effort and you do like live streams or interviews and stuff. Tends to be very separated, like the people, and the thing that I've most enjoyed about the podcast is kind of listening to other people's experiences of being on, creating their own stuff, and also sort of learning from them as well. Like I remember doing I think I did like a catch-up chat with Dan from the Aspie world, and he was I was talking about like how he does his short form videos and content, because he's it's like a speed god with just like pushing stuff out everywhere. And I was like, I need a little bit of that for my very longer form personality. So he pointed me towards a website called Repurpose.io, which basically like takes loads of YouTube videos and stuff and allows you to kind of chop it up and then put it out on different social medias. And that's been really helpful. So you learn a lot from other people, and also like it's cool to know like what their life is like, you know, because you see an autism advocate and you're like, oh, that's the only thing that they do. But quite often, you know, they have another job or they do something interesting, and like it's always very humbling to kind of hear people's stories, I suppose.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's the beauty of a podcast, actually, just to talk about things and get to know people as well. And I know, Tom, that because how do I explain this? Because this is so hard to think about with all of that, because your biggest topic that you always mention on social media is puberty. And funnily enough, you and Vicky were like, as Vicky as in Victoria from actually Aspling, who was on one of the panels before, you two have been like the inspirations for the puberty panel as well. So it's so great to have you both on separate ones, but it's good, it's good.
Making me blush. I think like I would like to put a lot more emphasis on Vicky, because like she's doing some amazing work, like actually going out and doing some work in the scientific community, and like, you know, making some actionable resources. And like I definitely say that Vicky definitely does have more of a greater input. It's kind of the stuff that I talk about around puberty tends to be around mental health and the experience of being in a mainstream school and having all those tricky sort of traumatic experiences. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but we'll definitely jump onto that actually. But I know it was going to be a panel before, but since we're doing one-to-one, we'll just probably like do like a relax. But for those who don't know, in the other puberty panels before, I did something called statements. Now, statements is like an open conversation, so it's not big questions or anything, but one of them is a question, because I thought, why not? But because the panel didn't actually happen, it's just one-to-one, I thought I might just still include the statements anyway, because I know that mainstream school and mental health is very important for you to talk about, Tom. So I just thought we'll just probably talk about it, and yeah, we'll see how everything goes. The first statement I originally put for this one is that I felt that I was out of place during puberty. So this is the thing that everyone talked about on the last few panels, like the last three ones. So where they talked about making friends was hard, and they had to face like different kinds of bullying, including period shaming, which has become advertised, as far as I know. And then yeah, just kind of like things like that. But Tom, what was it like for you?
Puberty. Oh my God. Not good. It's a really difficult time in your life, because I've read some books around like psychology, and there was one book that I read, I can't remember the name of it, but they said that around the age at which you kind of go through puberty is the time that your like prefrontal cortex becomes like the most developed. So it's kind of like prefrontal cortex like is basically like your awareness and sort of your control over your body and behavior and stuff. And one of the effects of that is that you become very hyper aware of your own existence. And also other people, you know, like whereas before you would, you know, someone was looking at you, just kind of pass it off and get on with what you're doing. Now someone just looks at you for a second, you're thinking, oh my God, like, is there something wrong with me? Like, do I have something on my face? Or like, you know, and that sort of, I guess, hyper aware state, you know, for most people can be quite anxiety provoking and quite, you know, scary, because you have all these social dynamics going on around you. But when you're autistic, it's it's even harder because you have such a, you don't develop those the awareness of what's going on as just a natural part of development. Like you do to some degree, but it's not as heightened, and it can often feel like, the entire school went on this big sort of holiday, and they made up their own sort of rules and ways that they engage and ways that they talk to each other, and how they say things mean certain things. And it basically just leads you to just being really confused and just kind of being, most of the time, quite like the silent observer. Like you don't want to say too much that, because maybe you understood what they were talking about wrong, or like, and you don't want to be too sort of quiet, because then people will think that you're, not involved in the group and that you're a bit weird. They're like, so that was basically how I felt for a lot of it. And obviously with puberty comes, a lot of different feelings that you get that haven't happened beforehand. So like before that, to be honest, when I was younger, I was always sort of obsessed with the idea of like marriage and having a relationship, because I've always been very I've always like placed people very, very highly on my sort of focus. They've been like my special interests, like learning about neurotypicals, how they work, and so, getting to puberty to that age, it's, obviously I was wanting to have like a girlfriend, and I was wanting to sort of, have someone, because I imagined it was going to be someone who is different to the people at school and different to my friends, and I could, they would understand me and love me, and like, but obviously it's not the case like that. It's very different in real life, and that sort of learning all this stuff about relationships and intimacy things through things like Disney and things like drama TV shows, or like,
Oh,
like
they're so bad. These like Disney and all stuff, especially the old Disney films, because they such have a very bad reputation to lure you in. It's like, oh, the first person you meet is going to be your true love. And for me, being there myself, and I can personally relate to this, Tom, because I was the same. But the first person I ended up dating with was autistic, but it actually turned out really complicated than I expected, really. But I did learn something from that, because real life is more complicated than you think, really. And I was trying so hard to get into a new relationship after me and my ex split up. But I just really learned recently, like, some people, they don't need a girl or a man or anyone who's transgender in a relationship to be happy, because you can always be happy within yourself. And
yeah.
it just makes you feel like sometimes I wish I knew that before I started. But that's their fault. You make mistakes and then you learn from them. And with puberty, there's gonna be a few like little bit of wrongs, but it's okay though, because you're still learning through that, even though it is difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of understanding where the lines between fictional and reality lie in terms of relationships. It's kind of hard, and you especially as an autistic person, you see all these things and you're like, right, I can do that. That's how it works. That seems quite simple. It's not like that, and you often have to learn the hard way. And in a situation where you're in a mainstream school, and perhaps you're deciding to date somebody within the friend group, everything that happens between you isn't necessarily private, and isn't, so there was a lot of situations in my life where people that I was dating at school were, being quite shaming of me behind my back, or like, sharing stuff with large groups of people without my consent. And it's so not everything. It's not like it did have quite large impacts on me, and I was kind of a bit thankful that I didn't fully understand like what was happening at the time. But I think that the whole thing about puberty for me that really caused me a lot of issues was around relationships, and around the consequences of perhaps getting into a relationship and thinking that everything was going to be sort of a person to person thing, whereas in reality, not everybody has the same intentions, and it can be quite damaging for us to get into situations where the power dynamics are a lot different.
I absolutely agree with that. That is completely understandable and 100% relatable, and it could be for everyone as well. But we're going to probably jump onto that because
Sure.
Um, how do we put this really? I put like down that masking can be challenging as a second statement because I know a lot of people said they found that making friends could be hard, and most like autistic teens who go through puberty, they do mask a lot, mainly girls.
Definitely, yeah. I'd say that it's kind of a bit weird and different for me, because I don't think I sort of actively tried to mask a lot during those times, because I really just didn't have any idea of what to do or how to do things, and around socializing, things like that. So I didn't tend to do a lot of masking, but I definitely did when I got a bit older. One thing that I can say about sort of obviously it does tend to be that females tend to have a lot of the issues with masking, especially at that age, because there tends to be a lot of sort of emotional, sort of communication based bullying from other women, other females at that age, whereas with guys it tends to be a lot more sort of physical. Not always, just from research and things of that nature, and talking to other people. So I never felt a particular need to do that, but I did copy things from movies. I would see a movie and I'd identify with a character, or I like a character in a certain way, and then I would try and act like them to kind of, I don't know the exact word for it. There is a name for it, but I tended to do that a lot, and I think at one point I got myself into like quite a big delusion, because I didn't really understand autism at the time, and so I was attributing my feelings of being different and my mental health, and not really getting the other people around me as me being some sort of alien creature. I lived with that for such a long time, and it definitely did. It helped me cope with the stuff that was happening by sort of being a different thing than I actually was. But eventually I kind of had to make the realization that this was an illusion, and that I need to sort of face things and understand things and take myself for who I was rather than what I wanted to be.
It's like really hard though when you go through puberty and with the mask and all that, because it can be difficult for anybody. And I know that some people do get bullied for it, especially I think what you tried to mean there, Tom, I don't know if it was either stimming or mimicking, because
Yeah,
that
it's around mimicking, yeah.
yeah, I
Probably.
thought so. Because it's kind of like what people do in drama classes, and they just pretend to be that character rather than themselves. And I always find it quite interesting, really, especially around the acting side. And it's interesting to see how a person can feel comfortable with that as like their shell, and then others just look and think, I know, that's not that real person. Why are he and she is doing that? And then that's where they get the judgments and the looks and the bullying
Mm.
almost.
Yeah, I think the thing is that I was willfully ignorant of stuff because for the majority of secondary school, I was quite heavily mentally ill, up until the point where I had a lot of self-harming when I was younger, and some attempts, and I had I had quite severe anxiety, depression, and dissociative conditions, as well as picking up an eating disorder because of as we were talking about with the relationships and stuff. I wanted to make myself look better, and so I didn't feel like it was enough. So I had to change my body so that I felt better about it. And so it's kind of, most of the time I just didn't want to add to the already heavy burden that my brain was under each day. And most of my energy and most of my focus was put onto people who were bullies, physical bullies and emotional and socially social bullies, people who were just nasty, horrible humans, and I had to deal with them at every single stage of my day at school. There's always that lingering thought that someone's going to come around the corner and say something to me, and me not knowing how to deal with it, and or pushing me or flicking me on the ear, or like just doing little things like that. And so I was just always on high alert. So the things like masking and things like stuff that I probably should have paid more attention to, I was quite ignorant to, because I was already sort of constantly in that anxious state, focusing on other things.
There's a similar story that I found through someone who I used to know. We were friends at drama school, but she was autistic too, and she had like the problem really, especially when she came out of puberty. Every time she would stim and mimic, someone will tell her to stop stimming, especially when we were in the classes, and I was a witness to that. When she would feel anxious, she would stim and rock back and forth, and a teacher would tell her off because of that. And then when she was younger, some stupid people set her hair on fire with a lighter. And these are like really awful, awful stuff that people always have to go through. And that was like one of the worst things I've ever heard, really, just because some people can really get really angry, and puberty is kind of like a weird time, really, when the bullying increases as well, really. Sometimes it can be damaging, like to mental health. Sometimes it will knock people's confidence. And everyone goes through experiences in different ways, really. But if things are bad, they get bad.
Yeah, and I think it's really a fault of it's a fault of the systems, because most schools aren't doing the bare minimum to try and include autistic people in mainstream education. I was talking recently to Mason from the Crohn's and Autism Advocacy
Oh yeah,
podcast.
advocate for autism and Crohn's, yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking about his, because he had an experience where he was in mainstream for primary, and then he moved to like special needs schools. And obviously I've had about a year's experience as a special needs TA, both in both of those environments, mainstream and SEND, special education. And the difference between the two is just absolutely night and day. And like, it's very hard for me to come and say, put your kids in mainstream school, because it's quite the majority of cases, pretty much everyone that I've talked to, bar 1, 2, 3 people out of everybody, it's been awful for them, and it's had real impacts on both their ability to form relationships, as well as friendships, the ability to work as well. And we know that the majority of particularly ASD1 individuals have either average or above average intelligence, as well as numerous positive skills, special interests, a lot of positive traits, but yet the employment rates are absurd. So I always think of work now, it's kind of like the adult version of school. It's this melting pot of people that, whether you like it or not, you have to be around and interact with. So it's kind of like an extension of that. And people just really don't feel able to go back into an environment like that.
That's a really good point, actually. I really love that term because I never thought about that really, but I definitely agree in one way, especially since schools, mainstream schools now, they are changing some of the special educational needs system. I know that one of the local schools I go to, one of my nephews goes to, and he's going through puberty at the moment too. And one of the schools the school he goes to now, their special educational needs department has like increased big time. So that's always like really good to know, really. And we'll probably jump onto this one actually, because with the schools and social clubs, and a lot of people, like including yourself, Tom, just say schools need to be more aware and understanding. But we didn't. I don't think we've touched on social clubs lately on any of them, because when you think of a social club, you think of things like scouts or after school
Yes.
clubs. And one of the places I used to volunteer, it was at an after school club for teenagers, and they had some really interesting stuff that's going on, but they were all in leaflets, and you had each leaflet about like sex and going through changes and all of that, and I just thought, how does a leaflet actually help? I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
well,
but
teenagers aren't going to be looking at leaflets.
yeah, I still got a copy of the leaflets, but I'm just like, I know you're trying to make it a bit easy, but come on, really?
Yeah, yeah. It's always they have a very heavy aversion to anything like that. Like school. I mean, the actual like sex education at schools was at my school was pretty useless. They didn't really do much, to be honest. And I think it particularly for autistic people, I think some sort of guidance around that area would have been really helpful. But I know that you're talking about social clubs, but I think with social clubs, I mean, I was always involved in a lot. I went swimming, I went to tennis, I went to scouts and beavers and cubs and stuff like that, and also taekwondo, my taekwondo club. And I really like social clubs because it's an opportunity to go to a place that you can exit from. It's so, one of the things that I kind of take away from mine and Mason's podcast was that maybe it might be a good idea to just go to a special needs school just for the safety and for the peace of mind and for the sort of more inclusive education, and then perhaps go to clubs where there's a mix of different neurotypes and people. And I feel like that those social clubs were the times where I learned the most about people, because my mum wouldn't force me to go, but she would offer me advice and offer some criticism on how to get along with the kids better or understand the kids better. But inclusive wise from the actual clubs, it very varied. And some clubs not so great. I remember this one time where I was in cubs or beavers or something, and one of the other kids asked me to shout some swear words because they split us into boys and girls for some reason in lines. It was like a birthday thing, and they told me to shout swear words at the line of girls, and I didn't know what swear words were, because every time that my mum said not to say something, I was like, okay, I won't say that. And so I didn't know what they were, and I got very heavily told off, and like all the parents and stuff didn't want to have me at any of the gatherings again, and like I was pretty much shunned by that group of, not by the kids, by the adults,
Oh.
who were parents to those kids.
Mm.
So yeah, I think no, I think a lot more education for anybody who is working with the general public around autism would be really helpful. And also a big focus, especially if they're a lot younger, for the parents of those other children, so that the autistic individual can be more included in things and not sort of stigmatized and boxed off due to difficulties with social communication things.
I definitely agree, and it's really hard to actually put like heads around it, really, especially if you are in a mainstream school with a special educational needs department, and that was me both primary and secondary, and it's very tough just to actually find like some comparisons, really, especially about puberty and how the way that they teach you. But with religious schools, it doesn't really help. It's a non-goer either, especially with the conflict that I mentioned before between religion and science. And it's just like two children who don't get along with each other. That's what I
Yes,
always tend to
yes,
find.
I can imagine. So yeah, yeah. I mean, in my primary school, and obviously Scouts and Beavers were stuff. You know, obviously they resided in the church, so they were inherently quite Christian orientated. Um, kind of. The funny thing is that those places tend to be the worst in terms of including me in things, for some reason.
No, no, it's
Uh,
fine.
Sports, swimming, tennis, things like that. A lot better for me, especially when there was like a focus for things. Like the intention wasn't to go and socialize; it was to do the thing, and then if socializing happens around it, then good stuff. But you know what I mean?
We're probably going to jump onto that because I think this is what I really would love to hear your opinion on this, Tom. But another statement that I put is that I feel parents, carers, and teachers should provide easy resources like easy videos to explain books or etc. to make the topic more inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think we forget sometimes that not all information that we put out there is easily accessible by everybody. Um, I mean, even in my workplace at the moment, we're doing a lot of stuff, trying to get people who can produce like things like easy read documents and things of that nature. And I think considering that people are younger, it's that their ability to sort of absorb information is a bit limited, as compared to when they're an adult. So I think that making information sort of a lot more concise and less jargony and like a lot more straightforward would really be helpful for a lot of individuals.
That's definitely like a good thing to do. And I know that with like the past resources as well, some of the things that I've heard and learned about through other people, that they were just really shocking, a bit weird or over the top, but it does make you think that with everything that's going on, really puberty is not really explained like properly in any school environmental setting, or maybe at home as well, because I mean parents could be like not embarrassed but just a little bit concerned about talking about puberty with children, especially
Mm.
if the children are autistic or and they have like hard time processing everything, the information.
And if they're teenagers as well, like
Yes,
the last thing that any teenager wants is for the first time they talk about things to do with intimacy being right with every single classmate that they have, with the teacher that they usually have. It's not like they take you to one side and sort of give you some information in private, because it's a very touchy sort of difficult or embarrassing topic for some people, I think the option of learning about it in one's own sort of semi-private space, or at least a bit more one-to-one rather than the whole classroom, will probably be a lot more productive, because everyone just, I mean, from my experience, everyone in mainstream in my class, whenever there was anything like this, everyone was just laughing and making jokes all the time, and the teachers looked awkward, and we felt awkward because of that. And like, I feel like there needs to be a lot more sort of effort from both the schools and teachers to try and make sure that stuff like this is a lot more understood and a lot more accessible, because it's not just about how to put a condom on. It's also about the mental, social things that can happen. Doesn't necessarily have to be around just intimacy. Obviously, it'd be better to have that a bit more understood. Everything more understood in most cases, but including those things could be really sort of validating to a lot of kids, a lot of adolescents who, are going through a difficult time, and they're being told that this is something that happens sometimes for some people. And I've never, I don't think I was ever came across a situation where, teachers or, I learned about something that genuinely made me feel understood and validated. And I feel like that's a really key and core component to anything due to puberty or sex education.
That I definitely agree with that actually, Tom, because it's pretty awkward to explain for like say well when people were taught puberty before our generation and they would have learnt things in a different way really, but not probably even not it probably puberty wasn't mentioned in the school curriculum at all, not even PSHE lessons or sex education lessons if you are in different parts of the country, not the country, different parts of the world, I beg your
Yeah.
pardon. But it's kind of awkward really when you think about the balance of things, because you've got like some people from like the older generation, like parents and grandparents, or some of the teachers who are a bit worried and feel a bit awkward in one way to have like talk about it or give lectures about it, especially if they had to like explain in science classes really, because I remember not having much PSHE lessons at secondary school
No,
at all,
me neither.
because it was pretty awkward. And I know that one thing that's I remember, as well as like the puberty and pregnancy and all of that, there was one bit we learnt about smoking, and it was really interesting about like with mental health, because at like school they used like a Bunsen burner, and they had like a little cigarette, and then they had like cotton wool like wrapped
Oh yeah,
around
yeah,
the lungs.
yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah, and it got like burned, and it just taught us. Well, the teachers showed it, me and my class peers, to show us how smoking's very bad for you. The girls just giggled because they were like, "Okay, this is just for a laugh." And I thought it is shocking in one way, but it's not going to prove anything really. And I wish there was a bit more depth into it somehow. And it was the same with puberty, especially when you have like teachers of the opposite sex in like same sex schools, like girls or boys, and
Yeah,
there are different gender teachers that will have to teach about puberty, and it's awkward. It can be awkward.
yeah. And I think I'm very much of the opinion that the adults who are in education talking about this should have a little bit more. They should be a little bit more mature around topics like this. Like, they're aware that adolescents are going to find it funny, or they're going to find it embarrassing or awkward, but like they take it as a way to move things on quickly and stop talking about it, rather than opening up opportunities to have more of a discussion about it. Because like, it's all good giving general knowledge and stuff, but what if a kid comes up to you and asks you, about something that they've experienced and something that they are experiencing. That's like, that advice is probably going to be so much more useful than like, it's good to have the basis of it and stuff, but it's not really it's not really geared to, from my experience, it didn't feel like it was really geared towards improving or learning. It felt like something that they were just trying to get out of the way so that they can continue with their day, which I think is a really bad thing, because it's very, very important. And you know, for a lot of people, relationships and intimacy, it's a very sizable amount of someone's life. And you know, like, it's very important as well. Like, learning about marriage and things like that, it's like, I didn't get any of that. And like, how am I supposed to know? I mean, so many things like that just aren't covered a lot, like money, investing. Like, well, why don't I know about money? Like, how to do best with it? And it's it feels like the PHSE lessons are kind of just a thing that the school wants to get out of the way, because they know that they have to do it, but they try and get out of the way, so they don't do a very good job of it. And it is not a central part. And like, I mean, just going even further, I never heard anything about autism in PHSE lessons.
Yeah, I definitely remember that actually, because they didn't really mention autism, not even once when I was at school, which
Nope.
is still shocking. And especially if you are a mainstream school with a special educational needs department as well,
Yeah.
that will be equally shocking.
Yes. Yeah. We did have something similar to a special needs department, but like, I just think that it's absurd, because they know from the records that they have at least one to five people in each year who are autistic. I mean, just going off statistics, it's going to happen. And like, they're not doing, like, they're not even doing they haven't, for me, they didn't do the bare minimum. They didn't do anything. I never heard anything about autism. I sort of took it as something very minimal when I was younger, and it was only as I got older, and through talking to my mom and trying to understand a bit better about other people and being introduced to the autistic community, that I actually felt, oh, maybe this is a sizable amount of, it does make a sizable difference in how I function and how I perceive and feel. And you know, and for it not even to be touched on once, it's absurd.
I know that there are other ways that schools have done it. It's really outside the UK. There was I think it was mentioned on American television a lot, but I know that there was a few times really. Now, I don't know if this is like a real thing or not in real life, but there were some TV shows, especially in like teenage ones, where you see that how do I put this? It's kind of like you learn how to take care of a baby, so because
Mhm.
you pair up into pairs like a boy or a girl or a same-sex
Yeah.
couple, and then they give you a baby doll, and it's like, right, you got to look after it for a
Yes.
week, and then keep
Yeah.
it back, and I'm just like, that's the
Well,
education we need.
I think stuff like that, I mean, at least they're actually putting some effort into it, I think. Um, you know, some things they don't get touched on at all. Some things they get touched on very lightly, and some other things, you know, I think that education around sort of having babies would be quite important for, um, you know, for people who are wanting to get out of education and be a mom or be a dad, or like, it's very important. Um, I do think that, you know, some things get a lot more attention than other things. And I think even something as common as mental health among adolescents isn't something that's talked about a lot either. So it's kind of weird how schools sort of function in terms of like their priorities. It does just feel like sometimes they just wing it, and they just do a certain educate on a certain thing and then forget other things and then touch on other things lightly. It's like, why isn't PHSE such a like much more important lesson? Then it should be a much more important lesson than it is.
This is actually agreeable because I I don't know how I'd like to say this actually as well, because I know that it's very important to get the messages across throughout there, especially within the school curriculum. And it's a feeling of like someone needs to be aware about this. So if you got like someone who is in the politics field, that works in education department, say in the UK or in the US politics, as just like a main example, that's the best way to actually get things started if anyone wants to campaign about having more inclusive PSHE lessons or topics or something like that.
But I would definitely point anyone towards the organization that I work for at the moment. You know, I speak as an individual in the work that I do online, but the stuff that goes on there, you know, it's like actually it's very like you can actually have an impact. Like if you're listening and you want to have an impact, you actually can. And there's a lot of charities out there who are looking for people to get involved and looking for people to share stories from. It does require you to just have a search for it. And it could be searching for a couple of keywords, a couple of companies. Stuff is it's really easy to find, but at the same time, it's hard to know about and find, because and you know, particularly in my organization, they work with the Department for Education, and you know, they do a lot of great stuff, and there's a lot of exciting sort of things that are doing that are kind of along the lines to what you're talking about. I can't really talk about it too much because I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but there definitely is change happening, and you know, people can get involved. It's just kind of finding those opportunities. It's they're not very good at organization in general. They're not very good at sort of doing that active effort. They kind of rely on people coming to them. So it's there definitely is a lot of opportunities that you can get from finding and emailing or messaging different organizations.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know that me and Vicky are, and then Cornell as well, working on the like the video projects about puberty. And then at one point, I would really love to talk to the education secretary about this, even though politics is not really my field. But it just takes one voice to make a stand for something, or many voices, in fact, really, because each voice is so important. It only takes one person to point it out, really, or it could, if it's online, it could involve many people who are advocates, who are just not advocates, but they want to share the topic to talk about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a lot of stuff to be involved in, and I think it's sometimes, I mean, particularly for me, it can feel sometimes a bit overwhelming. Just like where, like, or like if you're looking for it, and you know, for me, because I have the public presence, I have a lot of people sort of come up to me and ask me to get involved in different things. And I'm like, yes, I want to get involved with that. Yes, I want to get involved with that. And it's like sometimes you got to like prioritize what you're doing, and it's easy to get excited about it, and then I guess not be as involved as you wanted to be. I've had that happen quite a few times, but yeah, I mean, have you heard of lovely woman called Sienna Castellon?
No, I don't think I have. No.
She's the author of the book The Spectrum Girls Survival Guide, and she's done like some talks at like I think the UN around like neurodiversity and stuff. And like I am in the agreement that we can change things. I think things are a lot more harder to change than most people can think about, and most people are aware of, because it's you know, these organizations, these people, it takes quite a long time to kind of get the message across. But I do think that a lot of the work that people are doing for organizations and are online and in communities, you know, it's cumulative, and at some point there is going to be a breaking point where it becomes a certain level, the media pick up on it, and it's going to be something that's talked about a lot. And that's where I think a lot of the change is really going to start to ignite. We're going to actually see some of these things that we all know are very obvious, easy improvements that we can make to things, but just it isn't happening.
That's it. That's like the thing though. But slow and steady always just takes time, really, and it does take a bit longer to do things. But there's going to be a point that one day it will get there, and we just got to have a positive enthusiasm for it.
Definitely, and I think it's really great working with organizations on it, because they really, really, really need our input on it. Like there's a term for people who, like for autistic people, if you were to go into an organization, they would take you as an expert by experience. So it means you are an expert by experience, and if you get involved in projects, particularly around co-production, you can have a lot more of a bigger say than you would think. And it's something that I've seen in action in my organization, NDTI, but also just out in the world, doing different things with different charities and things like that. They definitely do listen to you. If they're looking for experts by experience, that's usually a good green flag, and you can really have a lot of positive impacts on at least the organization and possibly other organizations as it becomes more sort of normative.
Yeah, definitely agree. Absolutely. And then we're going to probably jump onto one final statement, because
Sure.
I know that advice is really important, especially if there's someone who's going through that stage, really. And if there was someone who has been in the past, who went through that and has found it tricky, that advice is really important to give, because it's just something that if people just need some help and guidance, that they do. But I always wondered that if you were to give advice, Tom, what advice would you give to someone who's going through puberty?
Obviously, I can my experiences are very mine. I think I would say in general that things are going to appear very scary all of a sudden, and there's going to be a lot of things that happen that you don't have control over, and some things that you do. And I think that the most important thing is to try and find, if you're struggling, is to try and find whether it's whether it's your parents, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a counselor, whether it's anyone like that, having somewhere to actually voice what you're feeling and the struggles that you're having is really beneficial. Because if you don't, then it's going to be something that you suffer in silence with until you decide to. And that's something that I kind of had to learn. My mom's an amazing mom, and she's she's head of SEND education she was head of SEND education for a large part of England.
Wow.
And yeah, she's an amazing woman. She was in my documentary actually, but I should have talked to her about stuff, and I didn't. And I think it's all because I felt like I was the outsider, and I felt like I was weird, and I felt like I was alone in all of this, and I just had to deal with it and experience it. And if I was to actually open up a little bit to the counselors, or open up to my parents, or open up to a teacher and actually request for support, I probably would have been a lot better off, or at least I would have somewhere to direct all of the difficult feelings and experiences that I was having.
And I know that it's very important just to have the experience, really, but sometimes you can get like a little bit stuck on things, really. I know that my mum, she was a nurse, and she always used to go to my local council just to talk about giving what autistic people may need, if they need extra help in education or
That's
other
great.
topics and whys. And sometimes I think I probably might get the advocacy from her. Really, I might have got the I cannot speak. I think I got this
I
from
feel
her.
your
The
pain.
advocacy part. Yes, but it's really good to have like some people there who are there to inspire you, really. And I know that it is a little bit difficult, but with your mum being the head of special educational needs system in the UK. Wow. I mean, that is such an amazing job to have, really. And it's so helpful as well. And it can open the doors to anybody, including family.
Definitely. And I think definitely something that I learned from both working and sort of trying to make change. I've done interviews and presentations to like the DWP and like to different places, and it really can be very difficult sometimes to feel like you're making a change, but it's really important to keep pushing on and trying to support other people who are trying to make a change as well. Sort of raise everybody up and try to, I guess, instead of isolating people and isolating organizations, not like maybe get in contact with those organizations and try to have some impact. And I don't know where I'm going with this. I think you were asking something about something. You see, there we go. I think I've hit my communication.
Oh, it's okay though. No, it's okay.
I was
But
just listening to myself speaking like, what am I talking about?
oh no, I mean, this is like the thing though. I'm always the same because every time I just do like interviews or panels and all of that, I always go like I talk backwards, and that's I think that's my autistic trait, and sometimes it just goes backwards, and with the communication, it can feel like or what do you call it when you put like two fists together or two thumbs together
It's like
or
friction.
yes, that's the one, friction.
Yes. I
Oh.
think it's yeah, I think it's difficult sometimes. Like for the most of it, I could speak quite well, but then like sometimes my brain will just go off. It'll like switch off for like a second, and like I was just in the middle of making a point, and now I've got no idea what I'm talking about.
Oh, I know that it's like it's hard to like always talk about things, but I know that there was so much more to talk about. But we'll definitely have to let you come back, really, Tom, because
That'd be
definitely
cool.
would love to you to have on the podcast again, and maybe get Vicky as well, because I am so determined to get you both on a podcast episode together.
Oh, I'd love that. That would be so grand. I would, yeah.
And I think we'll probably leave it there because yeah, because at the time of recording this, it's nearly 10:30 now.
Yeah. Well, it's so good. It's is it Friday? I thought it was
Yeah, it is
Saturday.
Friday. Yeah.
Oh my Lord. Well, I'm probably going to go out to the pub soon. Have a couple of drinks. Yeah, it's not often that I do that, to be honest, but I feel
Oh,
like it's been a very long week.
oh no, you deserve it though, because it is a Friday night and it's quite fun as well. Normally I don't do it on Friday, but sometimes having a few drinks will be good as well. But we'll definitely like give big cheers to all of that, Tom. So that has been
Thanks,
fantastic.
sis.
But yeah, so Tom, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been marvelous having you on the podcast. And I know that it's nice just having like a do one to one as well as doing the panels as well. But yeah, definitely we'll have you on again, and yeah, definitely go enjoy your drink.
Thank you very much, Sis. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome, Tom. That's been an absolute pleasure. And if you want to follow Tom's podcast as well and his YouTube channel and Instagram, I will leave all links in the description box down below on Spotify and on YouTube as well. Go check them out. They are amazing. And if you also want to catch up as well on the panels, I will leave them all in the cards on YouTube and on a playlist. And yeah, I think that's all I've got to say really, because I know I could get into too much about it. But yeah, so we'll probably leave it there. And until then, guys, I will catch you very soon. Take care. Bye.